A lot of you youngsters have been sending us in videos of you playing cricket, so we're going to have a little chat about coaching and how kids develop into cricketers and the fun that you might have. At some point we're hoping to be joined in the player zone by Mark Wood to join in this conversation. Mark's in a meeting, we think, at the moment, so he may turn up, he may not. If he doesn't, it's just going to be Key and Atherton. Hello. Where did it all start for you cricket-wise? I mean, this is your neck of the woods. Woodhouse Cricket Club is round here somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's over my left shoulder, about 5 miles away, so in between Manchester and Oldham. That's where I started watching my father, who played there. And it's a fascinating thing, this debate between nature and nurture. All my family were into sport. Yeah. My granddad was a professional boxer on my dad's side. My uncle on my mum's side was a professional golfer. My dad was a professional footballer, and I ended up in cricket. So whether there's a gene influence there or a gene advantage in terms of sport, I don't know, because you're never quite sure, because of the environment that then you grow up in is clearly a sporting environment. So you're given that opportunity, an environment to have a crack. But Woodhouse's Cricket Club, which, as I say, is about 5 miles over my left shoulder, it's still going strong, and that's where I started.
What about your sporting genes? Where did they come from?
Well, my parents, like us, were very sporty. My mum played squash, my dad played tennis, and then I started playing those sports, actually. So I played a bit of squash, a bit of tennis at Beckenham Cricket Club that had that all in one area. So when my mum and dad would play squash on a Friday night, me and all their the people they were playing against, their kids, we just played football, everything from any sport you possibly could. And then cricket was in the summer, and you were lucky that parents of the kids that were playing, they ran the cricket team. And we just did everything, really. It wasn't until I was a bit later that you sort of narrowed that focus into cricket.
Were your parents very pushy or not?
No, they weren't really, but it was a way for them to, while they could go and have a few drinks in the bar, we just were running around. You remember the days when you could just run around and do whatever you wanted, really? So we did that, all very safe. And that was good, because I thought those racket sports actually had a great, tennis and squash and stuff like that was a great sport to play for every other sport. So you could then hit a golf ball, you could then play cricket, because from the age of 4, I'd been playing it, and we had like table tennis table they had at that club as well. So every single sport had a knock-on effect that helped me for cricket in the end.
Most of the studies show that early specialisation is not necessarily a good thing. Yeah. I mean, there are loads of examples, probably Tiger Woods being the most famous, of a parent, drilling down.
Andre Agassi would be another one.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're drilling down on a single sport, and you eventually become a great player. But for every one of those, there's a million that won't make it as well. And there are so many examples of top sportsmen who played lots of sports in their teenage years. I mean, eventually you have to specialise if you're going to be a top player. But people like Roger Federer played every sport under the sun growing up. A.B. de Villiers in our game is the classic example of somebody who played golf, played tennis, played hockey, played squash, in the end found cricket. And to enable the whole range of your muscles to develop, to get those kind of hand-eye skills, hand-eye coordination, handball skills, I think the wider variety of sports that you can experience at a young age is probably a good thing.
Well, a great example is a mate of mine, Sakleh Mushtaq, who played for a long time at Surrey, and obviously with great success domestically, but also internationally. Brilliant bowler, fantastic, could bowl all day, had the other one, as he called it, not the deucer, highly skilled, couldn't run. Couldn't run side to side, Sakleh. You saw him run after a football. He was hopeless. He almost fell over, because all he had done is bowl. He hadn't played that variety of sports. But the influence of parents is not just about nature, nurture and encouragement. It's also taxi fares and stuff. You're running your kids around everywhere now.
And it costs money, everything. It's the punishment that I used to give to my mum when I ended up, she drove me all the way to Scarborough for an England under-17 game. And I was always embarrassed by having your parents around, so I just got out of the car, said thanks, and she didn't know what to do for the next few days. But I think that's one of the big questions, actually. I remember arguing with one of the academy directors at Kent when he's talking about, do these kids want it? Because Kent's a big county, and they're running sessions at the north end of Kent, as you should do. And he's saying, like, yeah, but if the kid wants it, he'll drive that far. No, he won't. It's not about that. You're testing the parents, whether they want it enough for their kids by making them drive an hour and a half, by charging them money, whatever it is. I take my daughter, you've got to buy a kit, got to take her to, they go to Malvern, all these things. There's a huge element of cost to that now that is a test for the parents, and actually some parents can't even afford to do it. So, cricket in general has got a lot of things we've got to try and get right to get participation up. But one of the main things is you've got to make it affordable for people. My son plays football. That costs next to nothing, really, and he's running around the whole time, and he absolutely loves it. I'm finding it very hard to get him into cricket.
One of the issues with cricket, and we'll look at some of the videos, Twitter videos that have been sent in a minute to show that you don't need acres of pristine grass or ground to play the game. But one of the problems for cricket is the barriers to entry to some degree, the cost of equipment that Kesey talked about. You do need some space. So it's not quite like football where you can just find a patch of grass, you've got a ball and you can kick it around. It's a pretty simple game. And so we have to search for ways to make cricket, more affordable, easier to take up and easier to enter for sure.
Well, we'll come on to those Twitter videos in a moment, but like the Madans in Mumbai, you know, they cram a load of games in. You can make it happen.
And cricketers are always... I'm always fascinated by the stories of how cricketers become products of their environment. When I went to interview Temba Bavuma, for example, in the township that he grew up at in Cape Town, Langa Township, he grew up learning the game on a little crossroads. You know, there's very little space. When he became a very good cutter and puller and straight driver of the ball, almost because you could see that's where he could get his runs on the crossroad. Everton Weekes, for example, who's just died, grew up in a little place called Pickwick Gap next to Kensington Oval. He didn't hit a six, he hit 1 6, I think, in his first-class career. And I asked Everton, why did he hit so few sixes? He said, we had one tape ball, one ball when we grew up. And if I hit it into the neighbour's yard, I didn't get it back. I learnt to hit the ball on the ground. So we are all products of our environment. Lasith Malinga, they say, got this kind of low, slingy action because he's bowling with tape balls on the sand beaches of Sri Lanka. If you bowl from a high action and dig the ball into the sand, it ain't going anywhere. So like a skimming stone, he learnt to with that action. So to some degree, we're all products of our environment. You know, here in the north of England, wet pitches growing up, I was not somebody who hit through the line of the ball, because if you did that in the north of England, you just hit it straight up in the air. And that's very different to how somebody would have played in Western Australia or Bridgetown, Barbados, for example. So it is fascinating, the environment and the effects of environment.
Did you have that black bit of soil on the back of your bat when you're patting down the divots?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, play wet pitches, huge divots, and that was the way you whacked them down to keep the ground flat.
You've got to make it fun as well, haven't you?
Do you know what, that's, I think, is one of cricket's biggest problems for young kids in particular. How do you make it? Now, cricket, if you're the best player, is the greatest game, because you bat, you bowl, you do everything. But what about the kids, actually, that are just fielding? If they go out to bat and they don't get any runs, sometimes, especially from that age of like 11, 12, 13, something like that, I take my daughter to games, and if she bats all right, and she gets runs, I say, don't be going asking for a bowl there. You let the other kids have a go, because somehow you have to make it fun for everything. They go to 11-a-side cricket very early on as well, where a lot of the kids don't do a great deal. Where you need, if you're playing 6-a-side when they're a bit younger, they love it. They bat for 2 overs, they do fielding, they always having a bowl. So you've got to find a way, cricket. We can't, because we love it, so arrogant, and all the coaches and the administrators to think this is the greatest game. Everyone wants to play cricket. No, that's not the case. We have to find a way to make kids love this game, to have them so they're doing something all the time, not just the best kids.
Well, let's show some kids having fun. Who we got first?
Well, let's have a look at Isaac first. I like this little video of Isaac here. A, he's dancing around, his footwork is excellent. B, this looks like a very self-made practice. He's got a golf ball hanging down from a piece of string. He's using a stump, and he's just nipping around there, trying to middle the ball. Now, if you think of the greatest batsman who ever played the game, Don Bradman, that was not a dissimilar drill to how he started. He had a stump, a golf ball, and a water butt, and he'd just keep hitting it. And in fact, you can do it. If you go into the museum at Victoria, at the MCG, they have that little thing there underground, and you can do the drill that Don Bradman did for hours on end as a young man, and that just gave him the kind of coordination, the feel for hitting the ball. And it's natural, it's instinctive, it's self-taught, it's not mechanical, overcoached and drilled. So I like that little drill that Isaac has got there. And you don't need much space. Yeah. You've got a washing line and a bit of rudimentary equipment. Yeah. and you can have a crack.
But that's your hand-eye coordination that you're getting from squash you're talking about. Just hit balls, hit balls, hit balls.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got a small ball, so you're sort of overtraining the brain and with the stump as well. So I think that's great. And that's absolutely right. We've got to be careful that with all the coaches and all the coach education with young kids, by constantly telling them what to do, pick your hands up, do this, do that, you're actually, what you're doing, you're teaching them to not think for themselves. We're doing stuff like that. You're just finding a method. You're watching the ball, which is the most important thing, because when you start telling kids, you know, get your head like this, they forget to watch the ball. So that sort of a drill is absolutely perfect.
Good stuff, Isaac. Who's next?
We've got Moin Rehman here, who sent this great little
Lord's
video
slope.
in.
We've got the Lord's slope.
I like the fact that there's got the slope. It's the Lord's slope. He's got his little crosses down, so he's aiming for those 2 crosses. He's an off spinner, and he gets it pretty much there or thereabouts. He's not going to spin it because he's against the slope.
That's a little bit of grip.
He's on the top of off stump. But that shows you don't need acres of beautiful, pristine green grass. That looked like, I don't know, can you imagine just round the side of Headingley or something, those terraced houses at the back of Headingley. He's found his little area to have a go. He's marked his crosses. He's got a bit of a slope, Lord's slope, so good effort.
The thing also is using one of the balls with a different colour, so you can have a look at the seam. Now, Warney, if he was here, would be saying, if you've got one bit of advice, spin it. Just try and spin it hard.
But that's exactly what I think kids have got to do. And this is from my own experience. I've umpired my daughter's game in a mixed game a couple of years ago, and they're like, you know, they're so officious on wides and stuff like that. Drives me absolutely mad. As soon as it's just a little bit out there, 2 runs, because they think they're speeding the game up. So then kids get so disheartened. And what you end up with, and this happened at Kent a lot, because while we haven't really produced lots of bowlers, they come from Durham and other places. Because I reckon, you know, as soon as a kid, it's like, so the kid then turns up, and you end up, because of product of your environment, with all these kids that just dob it on a length. You know, like Darren Stevens does, something like that, and they just run up and they bowl, and they're successful all the way up to, you know, under 16s. Then you get to professional cricket and you say, we need a bit of pace. So don't be so officious with stuff. Get kids. We had a leg spinner come up, do this, and actually bowled a beautiful leg spinner in the game I was umpiring. The next one was slightly wide, and I said, no, the batter could have gone and hit that. But the other end, they start widening them, and you see the kid get, you know, and they tense up, and you lose that ability to really rip the ball, because that's a hard art to do. So don't be too worried about them running up. If it's so wide, fine. But if the batter can go and hit it, let them hit it. Let the kids try and rip it as well. Let them fail, and then not punish them too much for that, because that's why I think leg spinners, we don't have many of them in this country, because they get booted out the game, because every wide's 2 runs, and they think captain goes, no, you're off. It's a nightmare for them.
Who's next, Ath?
We have got Harry Holloway, aged 3 years of age. This is
shot, Harry.
Fantastic. He's making his dad fag it down the road. Little tennis
down
ball.
the road.
So
can we recue that, please? That's outstanding. Maybe slow it down as well if we can.
Only 3, Harry. His dad's doing the underarm, which is great. It doesn't bounce too high.
Wow.
He's got a lovely follow through. And again, you know, don't need a huge back garden. You've got your front driveway there, and you can just underarm them to young Harry. And I think the biggest, I've got a boy who's 18 now, so he's way out of my range in terms of coaching. But from 3 onwards, the only thing I did with him was volume. I didn't give any technical advice. I didn't say pick it up like this, or use your front elbow or your front foot. I just threw balls for people to hit. And if you get volume into a young boy or girl, then I think that is the biggest thing at that age. Just the practice of hitting the ball, the feeling and the instinct of hitting bat on ball time and time and time again. Don't worry about technique. That will come eventually. Just get that volume into young cricketers early on.
Yeah, absolutely right. That is exactly what I think you've got to do. So they start working it out for themselves a little bit. And I reckon we all do. I remember seeing the thing you did with Steve Warsbin on YouTube. And he said his 3 brothers, they just played in the back garden. And if you're unlucky, you had to be England, and they were always, someone wanted to be Australia. And they just played games against each other, and they learned to score runs. I reckon we all would have spent time with my dad, my mum throwing balls at me. And I wasn't trying to work on trying to hit drives and stuff. Actually, what I was doing was trying to, like, well, I'm 300 not out or something like that, you know. And if I was out, I used to complain, and then they let me keep batting. But that taught you to watch the ball and learn how to score runs.
Can I just come back at you on one thing, though? Just grab a bat, Keezy. Now, just put Give us a really bad, unorthodox grip that would put you in...
grip.
Well, your grip. if you did see a young lad who's gripping it like...
Say like that.
And you know, I know what you're saying about just throwing volume. You'd have to get some rudimentary basics into him. When do you do that? If it's that extreme, would you do it?
I agree with you. If he's missing the ball or she is missing the ball every time, if suddenly you're getting bowled out at every opportunity, you do need some kind of basic instruction. What I was trying to say really is don't overcomplicate matters. Once you've got some fundamentals there and some basics, because think of the players that we've seen in this game get 100. You've got Dom Sibley there, who has the most unorthodox game. If we did a freeze of Dom Sibley's backlift, the grip that you're talking about, you'd think he can't score runs like that, but he does. He's got 120 here, he's got runs all his life. Look at Steve Smith. Steve Smith's the most unorthodox player you can ever imagine. He's probably the world's best batsman in Test cricket right now. So the game is remarkable for allowing people to do it in many different ways. You have to find a way that works for yourself. And the way that you find that is only by hitting thousands of balls. The old 10,000 hours rule. Do it, and find a way. Steve Smith, great story about him and his dad. You know, his dad used to just have not even a round ball. It was a kind of ball with edges, and he'd kind of throw the ball to Steve Smith, and it would deviate, and Smith would find a way of getting bat on ball. And it's just a very unusual and unorthodox technique that he's got. In
terms of backlift, though, I mean, you mentioned the great Sir Donald Bradman. Steve Smith and Sir Donald Bradman, it's that sort of rotary method, yeah,
absolutely.
Which doesn't seem to get coached that much. Equally, the fastest bowler that we think has probably ever lived is Jeff Thompson, and no one teaches the javelin.
Absolutely. The game allows for many different ways to do it, for sure.
I say one thing on that, the grip and the backlift. I've seen a lot of kids, they do this. I don't know what camera. Is this going to work on this one here? So if you're watching your kids play, and a lot of them close the face, you know, it sort of comes down, and that can be about grip. There's two very easy ways to solve that. I've seen coaches try and say, yeah, get in this position, full face, but they can't. It ends up round here like that. Some of that's because your bat might be too heavy, but there are two things you can do. One of them, kids, because they like gripping the bat really tight, this ends up closed, so you can just tell them, say, make sure it's just facing that way a little bit, so it's just open that up in their stance, wherever it is. And the other thing is grip it a bit lighter with this bottom hand. You don't have to be there like that, gripping this really tight. Then you come in there, just loosen it up a little bit. We say the same thing when NASA's talking about Zach Crawley, I think, on the first day at the Aegeus Bowl. Just loosen that grip a little bit. That just helps, just that tiny bit. That's a massive fault that I see with a lot of kids, but doesn't take a lot of coaching to.
While we're on it, you asked for a split screen to be built.
Well, the other thing as well is about backlift. I think these are some of the great players. And they all start in different positions. Lara, you can see there with a back jump back and across. Sachin stood a bit stiller. Virat Kohli goes just a little bit back and across. Ricky Ponting had that little press forward, didn't he, which was a reaction movement. I'd say Lara's was a trigger. Ricky Ponting's was like just a movement that he did with that little press forward. But often they all have a very similar pickup. I know Lara's a bit extreme. They try and get that bat face or that toe of the bat pointing up like this. And that seems to be, you know, we were always taught a bit more here. You know, fast bowlers, you've got to stay in this low bat lift because the quicker it is, you dig out the Yorker, all of that. I think generally the best players, Ben Stokes, people like that, that bat just goes up. And that will help all of you. A lot of coaches still coach in England, from what I've seen. It's all about the forward defence first. Get them picking their hands up, they can hit it harder. It's a much more fun way to bat as well.
Yeah, don't worry about that. Pick the bat up and whack it. What's next?
I think we'll go to Alistair Cook's garden. We've seen some. This is like the Garden of England, isn't it? I mean, look at this. Former England captain. What a beautiful garden he's got. We've seen the back streets of some terraced houses and the driveways. This is Alistair Cook's back garden with a game going on. So if you're lucky enough to have that kind of space to run around and hit the ball all day long, good for you. But you don't need that, is the point, I think.
Next.
OK, we'll go to some bowlers. I was hoping Mark Wood might be here because he'd be interested in this follow-through from Jude Taylor, who's 10, from Halifax. Slow motion, lovely action, this, but a fantastic follow-through.
Don't tell me he's going to nearly fall over.
It looks like he's going to tumble over here, which is the Mark Wood way. But actually, he stays on his feet. And his mum or his dad has obviously taken that video at slow motion. But lovely, loose-limbed, great follow-through. Looks like he wants to bowl quick. And if you're a young bowler, either fast bowler or spinner, I think go for it. Try and hurl it down fast. Try and spin it as hard as you can.
Looks like he'd done that quite a lot because there were quite a considerable
Bare
amount
patches, yeah.
of rubble outside the off stump. Right, Toby, I think is
Toby,
next.
left armour. Tendulkar, Middlesex Global Academy, so that's not far away from where I am. Probably Merchant Taylor's
Is there a
school,
bit of Harry Gurney in that action?
There is a lot of Harry Gurney in that action, sort
Yeah.
of coming around and then that pushing it across, yeah. But I think Ath's absolutely right as well. We did a thing, I can bat as well.
He's an all-rounder.
But we did a thing with Jimmy Anderson and Dale Steyn, Nasser and myself, and the two of the bowlers of a generation. And what both of them said, they also had different ways that they were brought up and the way they were taught, but they were both quick bowlers when they were younger. Jimmy said at 15, 16, he turned up and he'd gathered pace, actually. He suddenly got quick. And all they were told, I think Steyn said it was Darryl Cullinan, and whoever it was for Jimmy Anderson, they said, just bowl as fast as you can. Didn't care if they bowled 5 wides, because generally if they got it straight, that was the one that got the wicket. And that went all the way into professional cricket for Dale Steyn, where it was just run in, bowl as fast as you can. Don't worry about swing, don't worry about seam. They then learnt that later on, but all the way they were encouraged, just bowl quick. I can't stand it. You get a quick bowler and say, no, straighten up. Don't worry about that. You've got the gift of speed. We can straighten you up later on, but just bowl as fast as you can.
Those lines that were painted on the AstroTurf, do you like that as a guide for batsmen and bowlers?
Yeah, we saw Moeen, I think he was called, who had his 2 crosses down,
Yeah.
the young off spinner. I think those lines are useful for a bowler. Richie Benaud would always say, you know, he wanted a handkerchief down there and he'd be focusing in a laser-like way on where he wanted to pitch the ball. Not so much looking at the batsman, but where he wanted to pitch the ball. And I think those lines
Who was that,
are
sorry?
useful. Richie Benaud.
The other one was, as a bowler, was Curtly Ambrose. He explained to us in the Masterclass,
That's
and he'd
right.
walk up and have a look at
Before the first ball of a game, if I was on strike, often you'd see Curtly Ambrose. He'd walk down about 4 yards away from you. He'd stare at the area that he wanted the ball to pitch, and you could bet your life at the end of the day he would have worn that area away to nothing. The next little video is lovely. This is Rufus, I think, who's 6 years of age.
Oh, yes.
Bowls a lovely leg spin. It looks like he's got a good little setup there. He's got his football goals, trampoline,
They're a nightmare
stumps
to put
up.
up.
Got the
Now,
pavilion in the background as
He's
well.
doing this from a standing start. He's pitched that beautifully and he's spun it, so that's great. And what he will do is practice that, but then eventually get a bit of a run up. So he might do it he might add 1 pace in and do it, then add 2 paces, 3 paces, 4 paces. So he gets a nice run up and gets some energy into his action, which will enable him to get a bit more spin on the ball as well. He's lucky that there's so much instruction about leg spin now. You could pick it up anywhere from YouTube. You can listen to Shane Warne. When I was growing up, there were no leg spinners in the English game. I can remember getting a book called The Art of Leg Spin, I think. Father Marriott wrote it. He played 1 test match for England. He was a teacher who played 1 test match for England, took 14 wickets in his only game. He never played again. But he wrote this magnificent book on leg spin, and that's the only way, really, I learned to bowl the hopeless leg spinners that I bowl. But the instruction that is out there now for a young leg spinner like Rufus is fantastic. So, he's got so much help there now.
Ath, here's a question for you then. In age group cricket, from what I've seen, I remember speaking to Nighty about this, there's a lot of leg spinners. There's a lot of kids turning up, they can do that. But then when you get to sort of 15, 16, 17, they've disappeared. And in English cricket, we've got a few in T20 now. We haven't had lots of leg spinners. I mean, you guys would have picked... Chris Schofield was like the first one after Ian Saul, and all of a sudden we need a leg spinner. Why is that? What can we do at that level to keep them going?
Well, part of the reason why historically England have never produced leg spinners is environment, the kind of damp conditions that have always favoured finger spin over wrist spin. Where the great wrist spinners come, they've come from Australia, the harder, bouncier pitches in New South Wales. So that's a kind of historic legacy that we struggle with. But you're right about T20 cricket. I think one of the great benefits of T20 cricket has been bringing wrist spinners back into the game, and we've seen far more now in county cricket or T20 blast cricket over the last few years. So that's been a good development, I think, in the English game.
Got to be the hardest art in cricket, isn't it, bowling leg spin?
But that's why we have to have a way for kids in particular not to get beaten up. But I don't mean literally. I mean, you know, for getting smashed around a little bit for bowling full tosses and stuff like that, and get disheartened. And the lad who just comes up and goes dum 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 on a length, and you're like, oh great, yeah. You know, they lob them up, and actually then they get wickets and stuff. Coaches have to be so good at keeping those kids in the game, knowing, just spotting something. You know, they've got small hands at the moment, but when they grow, they get a bit stronger. This kid's going to have something. I reckon you look at the fact they spin the ball. If you can spin the ball at 12, 13, stick with them somehow. Keep encouraging them, even if they're going for plenty.
And no better feeling than stuffing a batsman as a leg spinner. If you then have got a bit of a googly up your sleeve, and you see that batsman go for the big cut, and then you...
Flipper. Did you have a flipper in your repertoire?
No.
Double bouncer?
Yes. High full toss.
What happened to Hussain, by the way? Because Hussain was a leggy, wasn't
well,
he?
He was
got
a
the
good
yips.
leg spinner. And in fact, we played together at under-15s. He's a good example, Nas, because A, his father was you know, very kind of hard and pushy on him. So he's one product of that side of it that we talked about. My parents were the other way. He started as a leg spinner. He rather lost it. He got the yips at 15. But because of the type of person he is, he didn't say, I've got the yips and that's it for me, I'm done for. He made himself into a good batsman.
Only good, is that it, Nas?
I was thinking of the right adjective.
Right, on to batting.
Yeah, we got Reggie, 5-year-old Reggie. This is beautiful.
Oh, shot,
Lovely
Reggie.
off drive from Reggie. He's got his dad or his mum there, just underarming tennis balls. And this is, you know, the point I made earlier about volume. Just keep whacking away. Groove that off drive. Got lovely hands through the ball.
12.
And you couldn't say there's anything wrong with that at all from Reggie.
I like the fact that there's a couple of those sort of check drives, but also at times he's allowing to go through with a flourish.
But don't you think as well, though, the fact that, and I tell you what, a lot of people do, he's still got the plastic bat. You know, there's nothing wrong with that as well. Don't try and think, you know, I know kids all want, you know, and it gets too heavy, and then you can't have that flow and you can't play that. And also, he looks good enough where you can challenge him. So you don't have to challenge him with, you know, like his technique or anything, but try and get him to hit into different areas, throw him the odd short one, stuff like that.
What would you do if you got someone batting, a girl or a boy, in a net, and they keep backing away? Now, not necessarily because they're scared, though some might be when they move up the hard ball. It might be just that they want to free their arms. I mean, back in the day, you'd stick a chair behind people. What would you do there for a coach?
I've had this exact problem with my daughter because she was doing that, and with a tennis ball she's fine, and then she would start backing away a little bit. So I'd put like a bat down or something, and I tried so many different things because I'm like, you know, try like a nasty way.
Now you've stopped her pocket money, haven't you?
Yeah, stuff like that. It is not an easy one to do, but also, you know, we have this absolute obsession with kids that they've got to be able to do everything, you know, and it goes all the way through, like from county age group stuff, where you say, my daughter's a nice little left arm seamer, you know, and some people are better at bowling than they are batting. So focus a bit more actually on what they're really good at. Whereas we constantly tell them, no, you have to be able to bat, you have to be able to bowl. You know, you can think of Ben, how many all-rounders, truly very, very good all-rounders can you think of? I think of Ben Stokes, Andrew Flintoff. You know, there's a few, but actually, there's nothing wrong with being just a batsman. You have to be able to field in this day and age. And yes, I know it helps if you can bowl a little bit, but you just make them very good at their main skill and work at all the other things. You know, and you can put the chair there. You can do that for backing away, but sometimes you just got to say, do you know what? I'm not sure actually batting's going to be your thing. Just try and hit it as hard as you can and get as many as you can before you're out.
Next.
Levi, very similar actually. Young Levi here.
Shot, Levi.
Got his helmet on. Hard to see on the angle whether he's standing too far outside his stumps and showing his stumps, but he's got a nice bend into the drive. He's giving it a whack. Looks as though he's enjoying himself. That's pretty good, I reckon.
Very good. Hands are quite far apart, if you talk. Would you even mention that to Levi, or just let him whack it? Let him whack
I would let him whack it. He looks as though he's enjoying himself. He's hitting the ball nicely, and then eventually it will come. He will find a way, I think.
But don't you think that the only thing I would say about that and this is where you have to be very careful as a parent, and it's really hard, and I hope I'm not stuffing you in the fact you've probably spent money on that bat. Sometimes if the bat's too heavy, it does become hard to pick it up. Yeah. Your hands have to go wider because you're doing that. That's why I say use the plastic bats and stuff like that until you get a bat that's right for you, but that's pretty good.
Next one might be a good example of what Keys is talking about, actually. Noah Pickton, who's 6, with tight in on Noah. Look at his hands. They're very far apart, but he's got a nice stride. He's middled it. He's got a lovely follow-through. He holds the pose like Ben Stokes did yesterday, so that's pretty good as well. But he, again, like Keys is talking about, maybe because the bat is heavy, has got his hands quite far apart.
Just whack it.
Absolutely. Club game. Odiham Cricket Club, I think. So this was just Odiham and just a little video that was sent in to celebrate the return of the game, return of club cricket last week, which we had a bit of fun with. Return of young kids being able to play the game now coming out of this pandemic, so that's great to see. The final video is a bit of fun.
Can I just quickly, on that? That's what I'm talking about with 6-a-side cricket and stuff. Kids are doing more in that.
Keep them involved.
There's not 9 other kids just standing around or 8 other kids waiting for the ball to come to them, getting bored. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Keep that going.
Kane Williamson's dog. Don't forget the pets in the family. Kane Williamson offering his lab, his golden lab.
Got him, go on.
Second slip, beautifully taken. Don't forget the family pet. He can get involved too.
That sort of went viral because I saw all sorts of people trying to do it with mixed success, it must be said, during lockdown. Ebony's been listening in and she's upstairs and, of course, very heavily involved in girls' cricket and women's cricket. What do you make? You enjoyed those videos?
They're brilliant, aren't they? It just kind of reminds you of the early days and just seeing how, you know, especially when it comes to the girls' game, how much it's grown, how far the community game is going. We've also got another clip as well, which I'll show you of a youngster. This is Emma bowling in the garden to her brother Joe. Got a nice run up and approach, good commitment to the shot. And again, it's just so exciting to see, isn't it? One thing it's worth saying sort of about how the girls' game has changed, actually. You know, I look at my era and sort of there were fewer opportunities, few club setups. But now you look at things like the Chance to Shine program, you know, in their 15th year now. And they've got to nearly half girls across the state schools program, and also the All Stars and Dynamos, which have kind of brought in young girls from various ages, from sort of 5 all the way up to 11. So we're seeing this excitement around girls cricket. The few things I'd most probably say that I think is interesting is, you know, the difference of how you look at someone like Kate Cross. She grew up and played a lot of men's club cricket. She played for Hayward with her brother as well, and that's one element. But what we're seeing now is more girls having various opportunities, more club setups, more clubs have either mixed environments as well. So it's just brilliant to see all of that progression that's been happening.
Ebbs, just tell us a little bit about the ACE programme, because we started off by talking about the environments in which kids are playing cricket, and you don't have to have acres of green space. Obviously, you're running a programme there in inner city London. You were telling me a couple of weeks ago that you've had a huge response to it. Just tell us a little bit about that programme that you've set up at Surrey.
Yeah, and definitely I think that what we're trying to do there specifically is trying to break down some of the inner London barriers, and also, you know, across some of the communities, such as this one is targeting the African Caribbean community. And there are challenges, and what we started to do actually is map a lot of the local community. Where are the street projects? Because I think, you know, one thing I'd love to see more is more kids who get introduced through street cricket, such as what Chance to Shine run, but be able to make it all the way through. So we're looking at mapping all of that, putting more community-based cricket clubs, not in your traditional club setting as such, but in parks there are things called NTPs, or non-turf pitches. I'm sure you would have all seen like the AstroTurf type strip. And we're looking to build much more community engagement programs around that, and just reduce the travel, break down some of the barriers around equipment, and then more importantly as well, make sure there's a system to identify and pluck out the talent. And then we've got an academy set up to gather that. So, you know, in the city, you know, I came through that environment. That was my introduction to the game. I played on concrete for the first year of my life and had no idea about this form of test cricket. And I think it's important that we make sure we break down those barriers, that young kids who are interested can go from those informal cricketing environments into maybe some sort of community club. It doesn't have to be traditional, but some sort. And those who love it and talented can progress into the more deeper part of the game. So yeah, that's what we've been working on, and it showed real success and real engagement from the community.
And what kind of numbers have you had in the response to that in the year or so that you've been running that program?
Yeah, so ours is really focused on the talent. We had a sort of talent launch day where we said, so almost like an X Factor competition. Come in, doesn't matter what your standard of play is. If you're a boy or girl between 11 and 18, just come down. We had 100 kids come through the door for the trials, and we were only going to sort of take 16 places. We had to nearly double that because the talent was ridiculous. Now, we're now going through a process of unpicking where these kids have been learning, because they had real skills that are almost ready to go, like come into some of our county age group programs, but they weren't learning in your traditional club. So what excites me about that is if we start to unpick that, and we've been doing some research and insight, it tells us that, you know, kids are learning cricket in other environments. They're learning new ways to play because it's more inner city based, or sometimes less of the facilities, but they're also coming through very good. So, you know, I think we can really reach out with some of these initiatives that we're going to do, and the talent that we've seen through that has been outstanding.
Well, it's an excellent initiative, Ebbs. We wish you well with that. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. That was a good load of fun. There's some
thanks for everybody for sending in the videos. It's great.
And keep sending them in, because we may have more rain delays with the Test match cricket that we've got scheduled to be played in your neck of the woods, Michael.
It's lovely here, isn't it?